Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Every Pokemon Episode Ever podcast. I am your host, Professor Chris G, and I am here to start taking you down the long road of the manga series, Pokemon Adventures. Now, what we're going to be doing here on these shorts, is what I'm calling them, is week by week, I am going to be going down one chapter at a time of the manga series Pokemon Adventures, and we are going to go down this together. You can download copies of this book online off of Amazon or anywhere you get your comic books. You can go to your local bookstore. They do sell the actual hard copies, which is what I have, everybody. I actually own the entire series, and I'm sitting back and I'm like, well, what can I do with these? I mean, I love reading them, but how can I bring this to our audience and make them aware of these Pokemon books, I guess you could say. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going down this one by one. And normally I'm joined by my host, Dougie Fresh, but he's not here. This is more of my realm. So I told him, I was like, okay, I could take this on my own, see if I can make this entertaining for all of you. And he will still join me on our weekly podcast, reviewing and recapping every Pokemon episode ever. So you've already clicked on this episode. You know all about me if you listen to the Every Pokemon Episode Ever podcast. And now it's time to start going down this rabbit hole of Pokemon Adventures, a story by Hinori Kusaka and art by, I think you pronounce it Mato. I'm sorry if I don't pronounce that right, but this volume, we're going to start with volume 1, chapter 1, and it has 14 chapters in this in this first story. And these podcasts that I'm going to be doing with you are going to be a little shorter, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a background into Pokemon Adventures. So Pokemon Adventures, at least starting off in volume 1, it follows your character Red and your character Blue, and kind of follows the video game portion of Pokemon, and they kind of put their own little spin to it. It's a little darker sometimes. The things that they do in the Pokemon game, in the series, and I'll be telling you all of that as we're going down this adventure. But Red is, I guess you can kind of think of him as your Ash. He's the main guy that we're going to be covering in the first volume of Pokemon Adventures. And Blue is his rival. I guess you could think of him as Gary. He's actually kind of drawn very, very similar to Gary, but they do have their differences, as I will be going through and sharing with you. We do have Professor Oak in the series as well. So, and the Pokemon don't change up. So starting in volume 1, all we have is our first gen Pokemon, the first 151 Pokemon. And I guess we can start this adventure. Are you guys ready? So I'm opening it up right now. So we have a prologue, and it's one page. And it starts off by us looking at an outside view of Pallet Town. It goes, in a place called Pallet Town. And we start off and we see a Nidorino. And then we hear, Phooey, it bounced off again. My turn. And then we go into the next panel and we see that there's a bunch of kids, children, might I add, who look like they're going to try to catch this Nidorino. And one of the kids goes, "Do you really think you've got a chance?" And then this little girl is like, "Oh, be quiet. I'm gonna catch this Pokemon and make it my personal pet. Watch this." And she goes and she throws the Pokeball. And then all of a sudden, the Nidorino is kind of looking at it, come at him, and it goes bonk. And Nidorino kind of like just takes his head and his horn and just blocks the Pokeball. And they're like, "Oh, it bounced off." And then here comes our main character, Red, for the first time in this series. And he's kind of over here and he's laughing. He's like, "You can't just catch Pokemon like that. If you want to catch a Pokemon, first you've got to weaken it, then throw the Pokeball. Tisk, tisk, tisk." And then from here, we jump straight into Chapter 1. And Chapter 1 is titled A Glimpse of the Glow. And we start off this chapter with Red throwing out his Poliwhirl. So he has a Poliwhirl. We don't know where he got this Poliwhirl. It never goes into that. But that's what he throws out. And then he goes, "For instance, try this. Go Poliwhirl!" Boom! And here comes Poliwhirl. And he's like, "Give it the water gun." And you see Poliwhirl in the next artwork, and it's like, shh, and it's starting to shoot out water. And it looks like it's shooting out from its hands. And you see it hit the Nidorino, and it's like, blash, boof. And we go to the next panel, and we see a back shot of Poliwhirl, and Nidorino is just standing there, and it has X's on its eyes. So it looks like it's a little dazed and a little confused. And all the children are like, "Wow, it looks dizzy." And Red is like, "Yeah, it does." And he's like, "And that Nidorino's weak. I throw the Pokeball and he throws the Pokeball and it goes boom. That the ball is kind of moving around and it's kind of just wiggling. And all of a sudden he catches it. He's like, "Ha ha, gotcha, Nidorino." And all the kids are like, "Cool." And Red's like, "Heh." And the kids are like, "That was great, Red." And we go to the next panel, and we're looking at another outside view of Pallet Town. And so it looks like Red is kind of narrating here. "Everybody knows me in Pallet Town. And why not? I'm the best Pokemon trainer around." And it shows him looking over at the kids with his hands behind his head. So he thinks he's the greatest Pokemon trainer around. And we go to the next panel, and it shows a Charmander, a Nidorino, and a Poliwhirl. And he goes, "Huh, what are Pokemon, you ask? Strange creatures that live in the forest and lakes." We jump to the next panel, and it shows a black outline of Red with the children just walking in the field. "I don't know how many kinds of Pokemon there are in this world, but I know I'm going to catch them all." And then we jump to the next panel, and one of the kids are asking Red a question. "Hey, Red, do you know Professor Oak?" And Red's like, "That old guy at the edge of town? What about that weirdo?" And one of the kids goes, "Well, people say he knows a lot about Pokemon." And then we go to the next panel. Maybe he can teach us a thing or two about how to catch them." And Red's like, "You don't need that, old nut. I'll teach you everything you need to know." And we jump to the next panel. "Maybe, but they say Professor Oak taught his grandson to be one of the world's greatest Pokemon trainers." And Red's like, "His grandson?" And they're like, "Yeah, he's been studying overseas for a long time. He just got back." "I don't care who he is. He doesn't stand a chance against me." So it's at this point we see that Red is kind of a cocky Pokemon Trainer. I mean, very similar to Ash in some ways. And where we're going to start seeing how hard-headed Red is in this Pokemon series. And then we jump to the next panel, and he's holding his Poliwhirl up to the sun for sure. The kids are like, see you tomorrow. And Red's like, see ya. And then we go to the next panel, and he has his arms crossed, and he's thinking to himself. He's like, old Professor Oak, huh? Oof. And then in the next panel, he walks into a strange person wearing black. And we come to later find out that this is Team Rocket. But this is Team Rocket, and they're all black. And they actually look like villains in this manga strip. And the guy turns around. He's like, watch it, you worm. And Red's like, eep. And he's like, where'd those guys come from? And the next panel, we see a group of them. In this drawing, there's 3, but there's assumed to be more, and it just shows that they're just trumping through. And he's like, hey! He looks over at their belt. He's like, those are Pokeballs. They've got to be Pokemon trainers. And we see Red running through some very tall grass, and then he's like hiding, watching Team Rocket as they're going over their plan. And one of the Team Rocket grunts is like, it must be hiding in the general area. Do not rest until you find it. Find the Phantom Pokemon. And Red's like, Phantom Pokemon? Never heard of it. And then we go to the next panel. We see Team Rocket just running in all directions. We haven't searched the West Woods yet. Comb it to the last blade. So we go into the next one. And Red's like, thanks guys for the tip. And he kind of sticks his tongue out as if he's going to go find this mysterious Phantom Pokemon. And Red's like, that Phantom Pokemon is going to be mine, or my name's not Red. And then it looks like we jump later into the day to the West Wood. And it's now nighttime. And then we see, boop, wobble, 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 wobble. And he's like, great, they didn't get here yet. And we see a random Pokeball on the ground. And Red is now holding a bunch of Pokeballs in his arms. And he's like, where are you, you little Phantom Pokemon? He's like, huh? What's that? And we jump to another panel. And we see who we later find out is Blue. But right now, he doesn't know that it's Blue. And then we see an outline figure of Mew. And Red is looking all sorts of angry. He's like, and who's that? One of those creeps beat me to it. And we see Blue with his nice little necklace on, looking all sorts of just like Gary. And then Blue is like, now, Charmander, go. And Red's like, a Pokemon. He's a Pokemon trainer. And we see Charmander use what looks like either an ember or a flamethrower. I'm going to go with ember because it's the beginning of the manga strips. And Mew is like, Mew? Huh? And then Mew lets out a big lightning strike. Thunder shock. And Red's like, yeesh. I've never seen a Pokemon battle like this. His Pokemon, that's a Charmander. And we see Charmander just jumping into the air. The next frame is just Mew. And it's like, but what's that glowing creature? Red goes. I've never seen anything like it. Well, go Charmander. Beat that thing. And we look in the next panel and Blue is just sitting there just watching his Charmander. He's like, enough! Charmander, return! And Red's like, what the? Charmander's like, okay. And then it looks like we see Charmander return to its Pokeball, and then it uses the sound effect. Pew! He's like, what are you doing? You almost had it. You. And Red jumps out of the bushes, and he's all angry, and Blue is looking at him. He's like, huh? And Red's like, hoof. My turn. Go Poliwhirl. Water gun. And Poliwhirl shoots out some water from its hand. And Mew is like, gleep, Mew. And then all of a sudden we get bash. And Mew lets out some type of attack. And it hits Poliwhirl. And it's a critical hit. And Red's like, Poliwhirl. And then all of a sudden we see Mew just swoosh and fly away. And when it flies away, it leaves with a huge gust right behind him. And Red's like, ah! And then he runs over to his Poliwhirl. Poliwhirl, come on, snap out of it, buddy. And Blue is just staring at him. Are you blind? Didn't you notice anything while you were watching us fight? I could tell right away that there was a vast difference in strength. That's why I stopped the fight. He's like, know your limitations or you'll only beat yourself. Remember that. And Blue just walks away. And Red is looking down. He's like, you mean I actually lost? And then we jump to the next panel, and Team Rocket is walking through the tall grass. The fields, it's all burned up. What happened here? And then they spot Red on the ground, hovering over his Poliwhirl. Answer me, Worm. What have you done? Ignore him. It might still be nearby. Go. And they just run. And Red's like, oh, man. And then we jump to the next panel, and it looks like, so it was nighttime, and it looks like the sun's getting ready to come up now. And Red's walking right in front of Professor Oak's Pokemon Research Lab. So this is old Professor Oak's lab. They say he's a mean old geezer. So I always kept away. And he takes a look at his Pokeball, and Poliwhirl is still knocked out, so he hasn't healed his Poliwhirl yet. But I guess the only place I'll learn to be a great Pokemon trainer is here. And then it shows him trembling as he goes up to ring the doorbell. Bing bong! And then he's like, all right, nobody's here. Bing bong! Bing bong! And he starts knocking on the door. Anybody home? And then he goes to the doorknob. It's open. And that is how we end chapter 1. So, as you can tell, Red is getting ready to walk into Professor Oak's lab. And just like in the video games, you can walk into anybody's home in the video game. So, as you can see, things are a lot different from the Pokemon main series. But going frame by frame in this manga is just like a Pokemon episode in itself. And I am so excited to go down this path with Red. Now, what's going to happen when he steps into Professor Oak's lab? Will he meet Professor Oak? Will he meet Blue again? And the Pokemon that he currently only has right now that we know of is Poliwhirl and Nidorino. And it looks like Red is very, very interested to learn a lot more about Pokemon and have the wisdom that Blue has, because he thinks in his head he is the greatest Pokemon trainer ever. Or is he? Because it seems like Blue had enough thought to stop his Pokemon battle before his Charmander got too hurt. But I guess in order to find all of that out, everybody, you're going to have to tune in into the next episode, Chapter 2, which is called Bulbasaur Come Home. And if you're following us, and I strongly and would like for you guys to follow me as I'm going through these chapters one by one. Half of the top is the end of chapter 1. The bottom half is chapter 2. So if you like this podcast so far, please subscribe and let me know what you would like for me to add to this, what you would like for me to talk about, and just different things like that. But it's time to go down this long path, and I'm glad that you clicked this download button, and I hope you are here to follow me going through all the rest of these chapters. Or episodes, I guess you could say, episodes of the podcast, chapters of the manga. But it's time to go down this long path, and that's what we're going to do. So, all right, everybody, this is Professor Chris G, and I'm getting ready to sign out for this week. And just make sure you tune in to the next episode so we find out what happens when Red walks into Professor Oak's lab. But until then, everybody, I am here, and I'm telling you, make sure you also don't forget to listen to our regular podcast, the Every Pokemon Episode Ever podcast, as we go down a recap of Pokemon. Currently, we're on Black and White and the Orange Islands. So, I'll see you later, everybody. Have a good night.